Hi everyone, just a little video on control wheel steering because there's an LO for this which simply states describe the following elements of control wheel steering. Control wheel steering is an autopilot, flight phases where control wheel steering cannot be used, which we'll look at, whether the pilot or the autopilot is controlling the flight path, the availability of flight path performance protections, and potential different feel and control response compared to manual flight. So some of those we can demonstrate on the simulator, some you just have to know about. For instance, the different feel, obviously. So if I unpause my simulator, and you can see that we're currently flying at 6,000 feet, we're in alt hold, we're in heading select. Let's just have a look at some ways of engaging control wheel steering. And this is recommended sometimes when the aircraft is flying through turbulence, for instance. In a lot of the FCOMs, the flight control operating manuals, or flight crew operating manuals, sorry, they recommend using control wheel steering in turbulent conditions because the autopilot and the auto throttle as well may try to follow what's going on and under and overreacting all the time. So you may end up with an aircraft which isn't in as good control as it would be if you were simply maintaining stability, which is what control wheel steering will do. Control wheel steering will maintain an attitude in pitch and roll, and it will give you stability through the autopilot functions. So we're basically going to be using the inner loop of the autopilot, but we can change attitude, as you'll see, and we can maintain an attitude. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to demonstrate how you can get into control wheel steering without actually pressing the control wheel steering buttons. One way of doing it is to simply switch off the mode that the auto flight system is following at the moment. So we've got heading select switched on. If I press heading select, if you watch what happens, you can see that the yellow autopilot light flashes on this aircraft. That's simply alerting us to the fact that the autopilot is no longer engaged in that particular channel, not in command mode anyway. It's doing control wheel steering in roll. So this means that the aircraft is simply going to maintain wings level now. So if I was looking to be on a heading, in turbulence, if the aircraft was to be pushed off the current heading slightly, then it would simply roll the wings level and I wouldn't be on the same heading as I was before. So that's why we need to be aware that although the command light is lit, we're not actually in an autopilot outer loop mode, we're in control wheel steering in roll. And I can do the same in altitude hold. If I switch that off, again we get the warning light or the caution light, and you can see that we're now in control wheel steering pitch on the PFD. Now it's just below the FMA, so although it's important, it isn't an FMA mode. It's not a flight mode enunciator because the control wheel steering is just stability. So now the aircraft is in control wheel steering pitch and roll. Theoretically, if I was to pull back on the stick now, which I'll do, then I can change the aircraft attitude, and if I let go of the stick, it's going to maintain that, what have we got, 5 degrees nose up attitude at the moment. The same thing in roll. If I was to roll the aircraft and then release the stick, then the aircraft is going to roll, and you can see that it's trying to get back to the pitch attitude that I'd selected. Let's pitch up a little bit more. And the aircraft is now in a stable pitch and roll attitude, and it's going to stay doing that forever until we run out of fuel. This is control wheel steering, pitch and roll. But I got to it by switching off the current outer loop modes that the autopilot was being asked to follow. So were I to switch any of those modes back on again, then the autopilot, because I'm still in command, the autopilot would then go back to doing, those outer loop modes. Now it's important to remember that if you are in command mode and you've engaged control wheel steering in pitch, then if you are flying up to an altitude, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to heading select, you can see the autopilot straight away is going to turn me back onto the heading, which was 270. So I'm going to let it do that, but I'm going to pitch up now in control while steering pitch, and I'm going to get the aircraft to climb, still using the auto throttle notice. I'm going to get the aircraft to climb up to the altitude of 8,000 feet. Let's just see what happens. Okay, now you can see that because I'm in control with steering pitch, I have gone through the altitude that I've selected. So this is something you need to bear in mind. If you are in control with steering pitch, the aircraft is not necessarily going to stop at the selected altitude. What I would need to do is, and I'll just hit altitude hold, I'm just going to re-engage the autopilot in command mode in altitude. So it's going to level me off at the altitude where I hit the altitude hold button. So it's going to take me back down to where that was. And we were climbing quite quickly, so it may be a little bit lower than we were before. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit altitude hold now. Just get the level off here. There we go. So by disengaging and re-engaging altitude hold, do it again. Then I'm going to get it to just level off where I am. Okay, good. So you can see I've gone 2,000 feet through my pre-selected altitude on the mode control panel. So this is something to bear in mind. If you're in control with steering pitch, the aircraft may not stop when you get to the altitude mode that you were asking for. And of course, in the FMA window in pitch, there was nothing engaged. I was in control with steering pitch. There was no outer loop mode selected. So therefore, it's not going to stop at the altitude I wanted. So let's do a level change and go back to 8,000 feet. And if I now press control steering, and let's just see what happens. And you'll notice that the flight director is on, but the autopilot is effectively off, because what I've done is I've overridden the command function. So now, although the autopilot is on and doing control wheel steering in pitch and roll, and although I've got outer loop mode selected, because I've deliberately pressed the control wheel steering button, the autopilot is not going to follow those outer loop modes. It's not going to follow the flight path modes. So let's just see what happens now as flight director telling me to pitch down slightly, so I'll do that. I'll increase my rate of descent. There we go. So I did that manually, but I'm using control steering to maintain that attitude now. And the aircraft is descending. Let's just see what happens when we get to the altitude that we've asked for, 8,000 feet. Here we go, we're getting close to it. And the flight director is telling me to pitch up. And I'm not going to, I'm going to see what happens when I get to 8,000 feet. And you'll see that the aircraft has gone into alt acquire mode, and the auto throttle's gone back to doing the speed from idle. But the aircraft is continuing to drop down through the altitude selected. Again, because I'm in control with steering pitch and the autopilot is not engaged. So I'm going to re-engage the autopilot. We'll just see what happens. Nothing, because I've gone through that altitude. So if I want to get back to it, I really now need to select a mode which will get me back to it. So there we go, level change. And now, because I'm definitely in command, no control wheel steering pitch or roll enunciated, then I'm going to get back to the altitude I want. Okay. Let me just try something while we're climbing, because we're almost at the altitude we want. I'm going to pull back on the stick slightly. And you'll notice that control wheel steering in pitch has engaged and gone away. Now I'm going to select a higher altitude now, so we can just try that again. So I've selected 11,000 feet. I'm going to level change again. Because we're in command, we haven't disengaged the modes, we haven't pressed the control wheel steering button. I'm going to increase my rate of climb by pulling back on the stick and engaging control wheel steering pitch. There we go. Just going to push the nose down slightly. And notice that because I engaged control wheel steering pitch by pulling on the controls, by moving the controls, with command selected, the system has gone back to automatically leveling off at 11,000 feet. So this is different to when you select control wheel steering on the button, or when you deselect the outer loop modes and climb to a pre-selected altitude. Let's just try it again, see if it will do it. Let's let it level off, let it finish leveling off, and I'll climb us again to as soon as it says altitude hold, I will change the altitude to 15,000 feet. If I'll make it, I'll make it 20,000 feet. There we go. Oh, 18 will do, won't it? There we go. And I will do a level change again. And again, I'm going to pull back on the stick to engage control steering in pitch. And over egg it. There we go. And you can see the autopilot light flashing. Just get rid of that. Right, so I'm in control wheel steering pitch. And I was in command mode. And I'm climbing up to 18,000 feet. Notice this time it looks like level change is disengaged, so I'm just going to re-engage it for a second. And I'm going to re-engage control wheel steering pitch by pulling back on the stick again. Letting go. There we go. Let's just see what happens when we get to 18,000 feet. Now you can see that although it managed to switch off the level change mode, the auto throttle's been maintaining my speed, and I've gone into altitude acquire, which is what I was expecting. And there we go. So we're leveling off at 18,000 feet. So if you were to change your pitch attitude while you were climbing or descending in level change mode, and you haven't reached the altitude that you've selected on the MCP, then by overriding the automatic vertical speed capability of level change using control wheel steering pitch, by moving the controls, but not by pressing the control wheel steering button and not by deselecting level change, even though it deselects because you have overridden it by using the controls, the aircraft will level off at 18,000 feet in this case, or the altitude that you've selected on the MCP. So if you intervene and engage control wheel steering by moving the controls during a climb or descent, the aircraft will still level off, assuming it was in command mode to start off. Okay. Okay, so we're in the very last stages of the of an approach, and the aircraft is all set up for a single channel approach, so it's not going to do an auto land. It's not an auto land mode, so I'm going to have to be quick here. If I unpause it and try and click the control wheel steering button, you'll see that nothing happens. So here we go. So it's not engaging, and I can do a go around, hopefully. And the aircraft is lifting off and taking me away from the runway. I'm going to try clicking control wheel steering again, and you can see nothing is happening. I'm having to manually fly the aircraft, obviously. Disengage the autopilot. And I should be able to engage control wheel steering now. There we go. And that's now going to help me to stabilise and fly the aircraft. Obviously I need to follow what my flight director is telling me. Get rid of some flap as well. Gear up. So you can see that in the final stage of the approach, in particular, the control steering mode, especially below 400 feet, will not engage, even if you press the button accidentally. So that's definitely something to bear in mind with regard to control wheel steering. Below 400 feet, you cannot engage it, especially if you're in the last stages of the approach. Okay, that'll do for control wheel steering, I think. Any questions? Let me know. Thanks.